Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about blood flow through the body. Now, this is not something we're going to specifically talk about. There's no quiz that you have to do on it. There's a quiz that you can do. There's no assignments, anything like that. But this is one of those things that I'm assuming that you already know, but I recognize that not everybody knows it. And so I've created this video. I've created a practice quiz, a Kahoot, even a practice EB and things that you can do, okay? And so this is because there's many of you that have not had anatomy, and so this might be a new thing for you. All right. And so we're going to start off here, and there's not really a start or an end, but we're just going to pretend that there is. And so I'm going to start here with number 1. And so this is our vena cava. Okay. So the vena cava or blood goes through the vena cava, which are the largest veins in your body. And from there, it goes through or enters into the right atrium. Okay. And so we've got a right atrium, okay, and then over here we've got a left atrium, okay, and we'll add a number later on, okay. And then the job of the atria is just to get blood into the ventricles. It just has to squeeze a little bit, and it's going to top off these chambers that are below them, which are the ventricles. And so we've got our right ventricle and our left ventricle, okay, and I'll add numbers for them in just a second, okay. Now, I do want to say that as I've got numbers here, don't memorize the numbers. It's just to give you an idea of how things flow. I'll never ask you what number is the pulmonary artery or anything like that. But I might say, hey, you're in the pulmonary artery right now. What are the next 3 structures or locations that you go through? Okay, so just so you're aware of that. Now, as blood goes from the vena cava into the right atrium, it's got to get from the right atrium to the right ventricle, which is here, as I just erased that on accident, okay? And the way that it does that is right here is we have what's called the tricuspid valve, okay? And I only drew it with 2, but there's actually 3 leaflets here, okay? And the way to remember that it's the tricuspid and not the bicuspid valve, which is over here, is that you try things before you buy things, okay? At least generally that's how it works. Okay, and then once we go through the tricuspid valve, we're in the right ventricle. And remember that at this point, blood has low oxygen. Okay, so I'm just going to put low oxygen in here. So it's low oxygen, low O2. Okay, now that blood continues to have low oxygen as it leaves. Okay, and so it's going to leave here, and it goes from the right ventricle through number 5, which is called the pulmonic valve or the pulmonary semilunar valve. Okay, so that's right here, these little valves here. So blood will go through there, and then from the pulmonic valve, it enters into the pulmonary artery. So pulmonary artery. So I'm just using an abbreviation here. Okay. This is still deoxygenated blood. All right. And so from there, we get into some capillaries inside the lung. And so that will be our number 7 here. So these are our pulmonary capillaries. And this is where oxygen goes in, okay? CO2 goes out. And so now here, as we come up, we've got high O2, all right? And so this next structure, and we're going to come all the way around here. Okay. Remember, this is to give you an idea. This is not telling you the exact location, right? So, for example, the pulmonary artery does not come out of the bottom of the heart. It actually comes out more towards the superior side of the heart. All right. And so what this is right here, which would be number 8, would be your pulmonary vein. Okay, and so now we've got lots of oxygen. That blood goes from the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. I want you to notice that in our atria here, there's no valve. Okay, so blood's constantly going into the atria. Now, once we get into the atria, so that would be, it looks like number 9, we have to go through the bicuspid valve in this case, sometimes also referred to as the mitral valve. Okay, we go through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. All right, and just like we did when we left the right ventricle, we have to go through another valve. And in this case, this number 12 would be the aortic semilunar valve. Okay, it's going to get a little messy here, just trying to draw this out. Okay. but bear with me, right? Okay, so here we go. And so what's going to happen is this is our aorta. So when we first leave, it's our aorta, I guess, which would be number 13. And then as we go here, so this is just arteries, so our systemic arteries, so that would be, I guess, 14. Then just like we did in the pulmonary circuit, we go through a bunch of capillaries. Okay, so these are our capillaries or our systemic capillaries. So if they're not part of the pulmonary circuit, they're the systemic capillaries. And so here is where oxygen leaves. And so we've got oxygen leaving. Okay, and from there, we've got our, so this is 16, we're going to say systemic veins. And then ultimately what happens is we get back to the vena cava. And then the process starts all over again. Okay, so let's just start in the vena cava again. Deoxygenated or low oxygen blood enters the vena cava. From there, it goes into the right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes through the tricuspid valve. And then it goes into the right ventricle. Right ventricle contracts, opens that pulmonic valve, and blood goes into the pulmonary capillaries. Once it gets into the pulmonary capillaries, that blue changes red. So now we've got high oxygen. Pulmonary vein, remember the pulmonary vein, veins bring blood back to the heart, okay, but it's got high oxygen, goes into the left atrium, there's no valve there. The atrium contracts, opens that bicuspid valve, gets it into the ventricle, ventricle contracts, opens the aortic valve, we get into the aorta, and from the aorta we go to systemic arteries, I know it doesn't say systemic there, but we do, and then we go to the systemic capillaries where the oxygen leaves. And so we've got deoxygenated blood, systemic veins, that should be blue, but we've got blood going through the systemic veins, back into the vena cava, and we start all over again. And so that is a basic overview of how blood travels throughout your body.